So today we are doing our Windmill Level 1 movement here. So you might need 2 blocks. Yoga blocks are good, or a book or a shoe, something to hold overhead, and then something to have down at the ground as well. Oftentimes we like to use the kettlebell as well. So I'll show what it looks like with the kettlebell for a few, and then I'll show what it looks like for the with the block on the ground. So the object on the ground is just a tactile cue for us for when we're dipping down into that windmill. So first I'll show you what it looks like, and then I'll break the components down of this movement. So for our Windmill Level 1, we don't have any weight overhead. We're just using a yoga block, a book, or a shoe. And you want to hold it in your hand like this. You don't want to grip it and have a good grip on it. You just want to place it in your hand just like that. You could even do a fist and do it like that. That's really challenging as well. And you're just really working on that balance and that stability through that arm that's overhead. Remember during the whole movement as well that you're looking up towards that object overhead, because eventually in level 2 and level 3, you will actually have weight overhead doing this position. So I like to think of this movement as a diagonal deadlift, that you are keeping your spine neutral. So how I typically teach this first is with a dowel, and I'll show you that today. Some people who have more of a yoga background might confuse this with a triangle pose, so I'll try to explain how it is a little bit different. We're actually working on a hinge position, so if you haven't watched our dowel hip hinge video, I do suggest that you pause this video right now and go and check out that dowel hip hinge video, because that's the first kind of movement that you want to become skilled at before you move on to the windmill. So with our dowel hip hinge video, you have those 3 points of contact on the dowel, and we're working on that hinge, so hinging at the hips. So then when we take this and turn it into a diagonal deadlift, it's that same position. So typically, when you first start off the windmill, I suggest you try a couple with just the dowel. Bring your feet hip distance apart, and then just take about a 45-degree step on a diagonal out with that other foot, and you can just slightly externally rotate through that back leg. So you're in this diagonal position here. So the hips, when you're hinging now, you want to go slightly to the side, but also back behind you. I like to think of it as like if you had your arms full of grocery bags and you had to close the car door, you would kind of give it like a pop with the hip, that powerful movement that we have there. So if you're just starting out with this movement, you can grab a dowel and try a couple of this. So your chest is trying to go over that front leg, and you're popping the butt back, and we're keeping a nice, solid spinal neutrality. Nice straight spine as we do this, and just hinging at the hips. So this will take a little bit of flexibility. So it's okay if you only can go to here for right now. Really keep that integrity through the spine intact while you're doing it. So once you get a handle, try it out on both sides with the dowel, popping the hips back and coming down where you're still keeping that contact with the dowel on the ground. I'll show it from a different angle here. Amazing. So once you get the handle of it with the dowel, you can put that off to the side. And now we're going to incorporate some of the hands. So the biggest thing I want you to think about when you're in this staggered stance position, and before you start and before you go, think of zipping up that tension from the ground all the way up to the hand. Okay, so right here in this position, right, I'm just starting out nice and relaxed, squeezing the feet together, lifting up, lifting the torso up and pushing up towards the ceiling. before you start to do that movement. And then same as you're coming up, squeeze through the glutes, squeeze the legs together. They won't actually come together, but it's more of an isometric movement, and lift up towards the ceiling. Okay, so when we're setting up for this windmill level 1, you want to have something down on the ground to have a tactile cue to, when you're working on building up that mobility, to get lower and lower. Eventually you might be able to get all the way down to the ground and you don't even need an object there. So I showed the first bit with a kettlebell. Now I'll show this one with a yoga block here as my tactile cue. If this is too far to go down, just build a higher tower, and that's your range of motion, and that's your goal that you're working to. Or if you don't have a block or something that goes that high, just aim to go about the knee. Okay, so I'll show different levels of what that looks like. So again, if you start, with that hip distance apart, staggered stance, so you have that object on the inside of that front foot. Other arm overhead, object, whether it's a yoga block or a book or a shoe, pushing up towards the ceiling, keeping eyes on the prize. Opposite hand, you're going to have externally rotated through the shoulder and palm facing out, and you're going to slide that hand down the leg. Okay, so maybe this is you today. Maybe you're just pushing the butt back and coming to about your knee, and that's the range of motion you have, and that's awesome. Okay, you can work on that for a little bit. Or if you're doing okay and the dowel felt really good, come all the way down and touch your objects. Remember, zipper up the body and come all the way up. So we really want to have that tension when we're working through this movement. And if that feels really good and you're pretty flexible and you're staying really stable with the object overhead, you can try coming all the way down to the ground. Zipper back up with that tension. Awesome job. So that is our windmill level 1. So stay tuned for our level 2 and our level 3 videos.